Good day. So in this lesson, we are going to talk about the elements of process of communication. So in your pre-activity, you were tasked to enumerate all of the daily tasks or activities that you do where you have to communicate. But the question is what really is communication? So according to Weekly in 1967, so the root word of communication is, in Latin is communicare. So, communicare means to share or to make demo. Now, according to Pearson and Nelson, 2000, communication is defined as a process of understanding and sharing of meaning. So, at the center of our study of communication, you can find the relationship that involves between participants. So, there are participants in communication. So, not just one, but two or more participants. Okay. So another definition of communication comes from McCormack in 2014. So it says that communication is a process of sharing and conveying messages or information from one person to another within and across channels, contexts, media, and cultures. So there is a wide variety of contexts and situations in which communication can be manifested. So communication can be manifested through face-to-face interaction, through phone conversation, group discussion, through message, through letter, class recitation, and just like what we are doing. So we have pre-recorded video. You are watching a pre-recorded video. And this is already what we call communication. Now, next slide. Now, let's talk about the nature of communication. So communication, first nature is that it occurs between two or more people, meaning there is a speaker and there is a receiver. Next one, communication can be expressed through various forms. So what are these forms? Communication can be written, spoken, through symbols, or actions. Now, right, so we can communicate through writing. So letters are forms of communication. Spoken words are forms of communication. Symbols as well, just like traffic lights, it's a form of communication. The no parking signs, it's a form of communication. And also through actions, just like our um, body language, our gestures, our facial expressions. Now, those communication which uses words, just like written and spoken. So this belongs to the kind of communication which we call verbal communication. So, and those ways of communication wherein we don't use words, just like our body language, our facial expression, our gestures, symbols, our actions. This is what we call non-verbal communication. But verbal and non-verbal communication, we will tackle about that in our next meetings. So another nature of communication is that communication is a process. So meaning it is a series of steps wherein its elements take role. So this is where the elements enter. So what are the elements of a communication process? So, okay, so to understand a process, we need to know the parts that make it up and know how these parts fits together and move. So the communication process is made up of varied components. So we have the sender, the receiver, the message, the channel, the feedback, and so these are the elements that make up communication. So let us learn more about um, the function of these elements. So number one, we have the first element of communication process is the sender. What is a sender? A sender is the source of a message or the idea. So this is the source. This is where the message, the idea, the thoughts come from. And next is the receiver. Of course, if there is a sender, there should be someone who will receive the message. That is what we call receiver. So receiver is the recipient, the intended audience of the sender. And next is the message. Number three or third is the message. What is a message? First, a message, this is the content of communication, which one seeks to share. So it can be facts, ideas, feelings, can be concrete or abstract. So again, these are the information, the ideas, the opinion, the thoughts, the emotion that the sender wants to say. Now, if there is a message, of course, there is a channel. So a channel, this is the pathway through which a message is transmitted. So this is the pathway, meaning this is the medium that we use in order to send the message. So what are the examples of channel? It can be through speaking, through writing, through TV, through radio, through messenger, through emails. So those are what we call channel. This the medium that we use to send the message. And then the last one is the feedback. So the feedback, this is the response of the receiver. So once the receivers receive the message, there will be feedback. There will be response. So it can be verbal or non-verbal. So feedback, it enables the source to find out if the message was received or understood. But you have to remember that no response is also a response. So even if there is no response, that means that's the response. So just like in FB Messenger, if the one that you have chatted didn't respond, so he or she only seen your message, that is already a response. Okay, so also among those elements, among these 5 elements, there is always a noise. So a noise in communication is anything that blocks or interferes with the meaning of a particular message. So it impedes, it blocks the meaning of the message. So these are the noise. For example, when you are speaking with your classmate and our teacher is teaching inside the class. So there are students outside who are noisy. Those noises outside, it impedes the message, right? So it blocks the message. So those are what we call noises. But we will also tackle about the different kinds of noises um, in next week or next week. Okay, so next, how do these elements work? So how do these elements work? First, the sender generates an idea. So the sender generates an idea. Once the sender already have an idea, so he or she encodes his or her idea. He or she encodes his or her idea through a channel. So he or she converts the idea into either words or actions. Now, the speaker, of course, he or she encodes the idea, which is the message, through a channel. Okay, now the message will be transmitted to the receiver. So the receiver will get the message. Now, once the receiver gets the message, the receiver will decode, meaning he or she will interpret the message based on the context. Okay, so decode meaning the receiver, the receiver will decode the message sent by the sender. Now, once the receiver already understood or interpreted the message, he or she will give, or the receiver will give a feedback back to the sender. So receiver sends or provides feedback. And this is what we call the process of communication. And do not forget that there are always noises around the communication process. Again, sender will encode his or her thoughts through a channel. Can be spoken or written or through body language, can be verbal or non-verbal. And that message will be transmitted to the receiver. Now, once the receiver receives the message, he or she will decode, meaning interpret the message. Once the receiver interpreted or decoded the message, he or she will provide feedback back to the sender. Okay? And that is the process of communication. Let me give you an example scenario for this one. So this is the scenario. In this scenario, please observe and identify identify the elements of communication here in this situation. So which is the sender, which are the receiver, what is the channel, what is the message, and what is the feedback. So now, which do you think is the sender? Of course, the sender is this one. So she is the source of the information. So this and the source of the information. Now, how did this sender encode her message? So through what channel? The channel is through spoken language. And then what is the message of the sender? The message of the sender is this dialogue. Okay, this is the message. Now, okay, so who are the receiver of the message? Okay, the receiver are these people. Now, once the receiver have already decoded, they analyze, they interpret the message of the sender, what is their feedback? So the feedback is this one. So this dialogue. So in this situation, there is a communication process happening. Okay? So let us review the elements of communication that was discussed. So we have the sender, which is the source of the information, the receiver, which is the recipient of the ideas and thoughts, or the intended audience. Next is the message, which is the content or the ideas and expressions or emotions itself. Next is the channel, which is the medium used in order to encode the message. And then we have the feedback. So feedback is the reply of the receiver to the sender. But no feedback already means that is the feedback. And around these elements in the communication process, there is always noise that will impede or that will be a hindrance or block the message. Okay, so that, or let me give you another example. So in this situation that we are having right now, the communication that we are having right now, the sender is me. So I am the sender. The receiver is, of course, those who will watch this video. Now, the message or the content of this video, that is the message. The channel is through a pre-recorded video and also through YouTube and Schoology. So those are the channel. And the feedback are the replies or the comments that you will be given after watching this video. So those are the feedback. Or also, if you will not reply, that is already a feedback. So we already discussed what communication is, what its elements are, and how does its process works. So in the next lesson or lessons, we will discuss the different functions of communication. So see you in the next lesson.